Hello and welcome. Rabbi Jacobson here for the weekly Wednesday night discussion, the title being The Secret of Giving Birth. The very word birth evokes in us a sense of both awe, fascination, and mystery and mystique. The birth of our own births is the beginning of our journey on this earth. The birth of our children. For those of us that are blessed, the birth of our grandchildren. The birth of an idea, the birth of a concept. The birth of a new era, of a new world. The birth of new technologies. Wherever you turn and you hear the word birth, right away, that one word immediately conjures up the feeling of something refreshing, something dramatic, something different. But when you think about it, what really is the secret of birth? Once you have a status quo and things are just rolling along, what suddenly causes that dramatic change, that shift? Even a paradigm shift, you can call it. From a state that was earlier one way and now suddenly a birthing of something new. Why is it not just continuing that which was there before? So the word birth is both enigmatic and fascinating, and it lies at the heart of all of life and everything we cherish. Because everything in this world, in one way or another, at some point goes to a birthing, a beginning. So we're going to discuss what this is and how we can actually create rebirth, or birth and rebirth in our lives, which of course is also the secret to happiness. Because the monotony, the routine, the patterns, as I said, the status quo is what can kill us. It kills us in the sheer weight of just doing the same thing again and again. And at some point you say, what's the point? Why? Where am I going? Why I chose to use this topic this week is also because we're about to enter the new month of Nisan. This is considered the first month, the beginning of the lunar calendar. Hachodesh hazeh lachem, which we'll be reading this weekend. In addition to the chapter Tazria, we also, the chapter in the book of Leviticus, we also read an extra chapter with the fourth of the four special chapters called Hachodesh. Hachodesh hazeh lachem means this shall be for you the new month. Chodesh in Hebrew, chidush, is new, the birth of the new moon, which comes as the opening statement of the beginning of the exodus of the Jewish people 15 days after the new month of Nisan. And the exodus from Egypt is compared to a birth, and the prophet Yecheskel compares it actually to the birth, with the birth pangs and the blood and all the challenges of a birth of a child coming out of its mother's womb through the narrow canal and coming into becoming and expressing itself into this reality what's called birth. So the birth of the Jewish nation is associated with Passover. And hence the theme of birth is very appropriate, as well as, interestingly, the chapter that I mentioned, Tazria, is also Isha ki Tazria, when a woman will bear seed. The Yolda Zachan, she will give birth to a child. Again, birthing. So birth is the predominant theme of this period in time, and many, many great lessons can be learned from the birthing in our own time, each in our own personal way, whether it's the birth of actually opening up new channels and actually giving birth to a child, or the birth of the conceptual child, which can be a student, can be a friend, or the birth of a new opening, a new opportunity, a new beginning, getting beyond the trappings of our past into a new era. And of course the birth of a new world order, which is we all hope for, a world peace, a world that will be very different than the world that we're familiar with. So all this adds up to one big question. What is the secret of birthing? Now, of course, the very definition of birth, as I mentioned, is a definition that defies that type of answer, because the whole point of a birth is that we are here seeing a birth. So what happened before the birth? Before you were born, you don't know what you were like before the birth. That's why birth is so fascinating in its transitionary metamorphosis type of stage, bringing us from one state to a birthing state. We're not talking about just continuing the past. And yet, when you look into the Torah's deeper secrets, especially the mystical and the Hasidic teachings, you find tremendous lessons in the concept of birthing, and I'm going to address that right now. Let's begin, of course, with the birth of the Jewish nation, the birth of the people through Egypt. It's interesting, the comparison to the birth pangs of the birth of a child. Why does it have to go through pain? So we know in the beginning of the book of the Bible, beginning of Genesis, and the beginning of the Bible of the Torah, it says that each the serpent, Adam and Eve, each one received a tit for tat, a type of consequence from the action of them transgressing God's command and eating from the tree of knowledge. And it says that the woman, her so-called punishment, I don't like the word punishment, I say consequence, like cause and effect, the effect of her disconnecting by eating from that tree of knowledge, of good and evil, said from here on, will be your pregnancy and your birthing will be difficult. The question is asked, why? What does one thing have to do with the next? The answer lies, of course, in the secret of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What is the tree of knowledge of good and evil? So there are many different explanations what exactly this tree was about. There was the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the key word is knowledge, Eitz Hadas. What is das? Das, as explained in Tanya, is from the word hiskashus, from the word connection, from the word bonding, from the word intimacy. So you can know an idea. You can understand, I should say, you can conceive of an idea. You can understand an idea. Chachma and Bina, the first two aspects of intellect, the conception, the understanding. But intimacy is knowing. When you know it, you say, I know it. It's become one with you. There are many ideas as we study them. So first it's an idea that is still strange, still somewhat not your own, you haven't owned it, and then there comes the aha, the ownership, the integration, which that's why das is also that gives birth to a feeling, a sensation that comes as a result of this understanding. Intimacy. Now, good and evil were two paths that we were given the option, the choice to choose from. But even a person who's never chosen who's never chosen evil, knows that there are two paths. I should say, are aware that there are two paths. But when Adam and Eve, what they did was they entered and they tasted from the forbidden fruit. They tasted, and therefore experienced good and evil. And once they experienced good and evil, something happened. There was a shift of consciousness. What happened? A split between matter and spirit. A split between body and soul. A split between who you are and what you do. Up till that point, their sexuality, their consciousness was aligned with the purpose of their existence. As soon as they tasted from something that defied that purpose, God said, look at the tree. It's there for you to remind you that there are things to do and there are things not to do. But taste only from the tree of life, because the tree of life has no duality. Tree of good and evil, by definition, good and evil is a duality. Know that there's a duality, but don't taste from it. As soon as they tasted of the duality and they experienced it, you can't go back and say, oh, you know what, I want a world of unity and seamlessness. Once you've lied, once you've had a duplicitous experience, you can't just say there's no more duplicity. I made a mistake. Because you've opened up the Pandora's box. You've sensed yourself, the conscious you, as separate from your life. When you look at people who are really in the zone and completely connected, they don't even sense themselves. They're like a state of being rather than an experience. Love, is it a verb or a noun? Love as a state of being is like you're submerged in immersed and submerged in the waters, where you become one with the water, completely consumed. When you're, for example, when you're reading a book, completely engrossed in the book, you don't even realize it's a book. You don't even realize you're turning pages, because you're so captivated. There's no difference between the object and the subject. Meaning, the subject being the person, and what you're reading. You become one with your experience, intimate, das. If you're aware that you're turning pages, or you're aware of the experience, you're already not totally in it, which is called being in the zone. You're completely there, and you feel like you're like seamlessly connected. You don't even feel anything. You're seamlessly connected with whatever it is that you're doing. That's completely being there, being present. When they ate from the tree of knowledge, they tasted of the duality, and now, it's me, and then the experience. You're no longer just a seamless flow, and that's why they were embarrassed of their nudity, and they covered themselves, because suddenly they were self-conscious. Self-consciousness was born. I once wrote a long article about whether most people think consciousness, awareness is a virtue. But in truth, consciousness is essentially self-consciousness, which means you're conscious of something. If you're really it, why would you be conscious of it? You just do it. as it is with true love, as it is with see children as they're completely immersed. And the example for it in the Kabbalistic terminology would be the Ein Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum, before the great contraction, which is actually the root of the tree of knowledge and the root of the diminishment of the moon, which I'll soon talk about. And the root of the breakage and the shattering of the containers starts with the tzimtzum, the first duality, the concealment. But before the tzimtzum was total seamlessness, total shape. It was a pre-conscious state. There was only one, the only unity of the divine consciousness was the only thing that existed. The tzimtzum created another state of consciousness where a black hole, a concealment, and now we're searching for the light. And once Adam and Eve ate from that tree, that's what happened. So what is the result? That when it comes to birthing a child, it's not going to come easily. Birthing would come easily when there's seamlessness between matter and spirit. The channels are open. The channels from a higher reality come into a lower reality. But once there's a constriction, once there's been a duality, a split has occurred, a rift, now it's not that easy to just bring in a new life, to bring in a new energy, a new force into this world. And thus, as a consequence of the duality, of the rift that Chava created, Adam experienced it in a different way. That as a result, a birthing will not come easily. So it wasn't just some punishment. It was demonstrating that every time we struggle when we give birth means because this world is not completely aligned with its purpose. Adam, it expressed itself in that with the sweat of your brow you're going to have to eat bread. Why? Till then he wouldn't have to work. He would be involved in spiritual growth, in reaching higher psychological and spiritual heights, and the bread would be provided for him. Now that there is a rift between matter and spirit, you can no longer just live in spirit and survive in a material world. You're going to have to struggle, sweat, to make a living. And hence the career was born, the work, which, as Marx puts it, not Groucho Marx, Karl Marx, the alienation between you and the work you do, the alienation between you and others, the alienation of a material world disconnected from a spiritual world in an attempt, in the effort, which is our work, is reconnecting the two. So essentially when we talk about the Messianic era, which is also compared to our birth, is we're talking about a state when it will be realigned and a total fusion. So now once we understand the personal type of birth, let's take it now to the collective birth of the Jewish nation. They too had to go through a difficult kur habarzel, like a melting pot, a melting oven that hardens the metal. Why? Because to have birthing in this world doesn't come easily. It wasn't enough that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob just did their work. We're living in a material world that is disconnected. As the Talmud, the Medrash says, that after the eating from the tree of knowledge, the rift just grew. With the second generation of sin and transgression, the third generation, I would say, of displacement, the fourth generation, till the seventh generation. 10 generations later, till the 7 generations from Adam, until it lowered itself to the biggest possible rift. And then Abraham began to reverse the process. Abraham was the 20th generation from Adam. He began to reverse the process and bringing back the divine, really realigning the two. Isaac did a little more. And all the way till Moses, who consummated the 7th generation, consummated it by building the Sinai, first the exodus from Egypt, leading to the revelation at Sinai and the building of the temple. All 3 steps in the process of birthing. But this birthing doesn't come easily because matter and spirit are split. However, at Sinai, we were given the power to reconnect the two, and in the Mishkan, the temple that was built, we consummated that. And ever since, our work has been is to finish the job of reconnecting matter and spirit, body and soul, form and function, inner and outer, into a total fusion. So birth in our world does not come easily. Just as the individual birth comes through the birth pangs and the pains of pregnancy, the Jewish people 210 years went through birth pains. And finally, when they came out of the Exodus, they came out of the Exodus from Egypt, which is what we celebrate Passover in close to 2 weeks from now, is their birth, the birth of the nation. Now, what we learn from this is that birth is exactly the beautiful force that counters duality, the birth of a new energy, which is the exact antithesis to boredom, to monotony, and just things going on as they were. As the cynics say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Birth is saying absolutely not. We have the power to give birth. But it takes effort. because you need to open up channels that are constricted, that are narrow. Just like when it comes to an idea, it needs effort to be able to get into the collective unconscious or superconscious. In the Kabbalistic terminology, Chochmas Tema, the Koyach HaMaskil, the power to conceive, you need to have strong effort. And Kabbalah Sel, which means also absolute, utter commitment. As he explains in the classic Hemshech called Samach Vav from the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, whose Yahrzeit happens to be on the 2nd of Nisan as well, the second day, which will be next Sunday. Explains at length this concept of how you create birthing of a new energy through the effort and through total commitment. Why doesn't it come easily? Why do you need the effort? Because think of like a flintstone. When you take a hot coal, that may be concealed the flame within it, but you can fan it and easily reignite it, or at least let the flames rise. Not really ignite it, it is ignited. It comes to a flintstone. Tzurach Halomish, a flintstone, it doesn't help. Because the spark in there is so hidden and concealed that you need to strike it with pressure, exertion. And that releases the flame within. Interestingly, however, a flintstone can lie underwater and the sparks will not become extinguished. You put a coal in the water and it will. So too in our consciousness, in our superconscious, we have a state that something is concealed, and it needs some effort to fan it, to be able to reveal it, but it's close to being revealed. Think of it like an object that's behind a closed door in its chest, and you just need to open up. So you need some effort. However, then there are more superconscious forces that are called the Helam Atzmi. They're fundamentally concealed to the point that they do not just easily emerge. So birthing from that level requires the effort. And that's because we live in a world of duality where spirit and matter are not aligned. So the reality of our existence doesn't easily assimilate and easily absorb a new experience. And think of it psychologically. Once we're in our comfort zones, once we've developed a mind, a Weltanschauung, a mindset, an outlook at things, it's very hard to introduce a new idea to somebody. And the smarter you are, the harder it is, because you already are set in your ways. So to open up a channel requires effort and utter commitment and persistence to bring in that new birth. So every birth is going to require, in a world like ours, that type of effort and commitment. And without that, you will not have the birthing. It will not happen automatically. Now, obviously, from time to time, as God in His mysterious ways would have it, it could be through the accumulative effort over generations. They accumulate, and that's why some things are easier for us to open up. The Zohar says this actually about old technology. The fact that the 1840, which is considered the Industrial Revolution, the Zohar says that year, Taf Reish in the Hebrew calendar would be the year 5600, says that then that will be based on a Zohar, will be an explosion of knowledge, of higher knowledge and lower knowledge. Mystical teachings began to explode as well as technology. And it's interesting. In a period of 40, 50, 100 years, more developments and more inventions, more birthings of ideas took place than the previous 1,000 years, which doesn't make sense, seemingly, because it should accumulate. And every year there should be another discovery. But everyone agrees that it suddenly exploded out of nowhere. And it only has been accelerating since in the 20th century and the 21st century, as we see technology just at the dawn of the age of the internet and medical breakthroughs that are still so many more to come. Why? Because accumulatively, effort was made. The exertion and efforts and persistence of people over the generations weakened, so to call, the resistance and opened up channels. And then there comes a point where there's a eruption, like a volcanic eruption. So that doesn't happen overnight. It's because the pressures have been building. And we are slowly closer getting to the birthing of a total fusion of matter and spirit. Or in the words of Einstein, E equals mc squared, a fusion of matter and energy. To the point where we realize today that matter is energy and energy is matter and they're reversible. Yet it takes effort to join the tap. You need to either heat up the matter to turn it into energy or accelerate the particles. Nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, it takes effort to release energy, and especially a new energy and a birthing type of energy. So there you have the general outlook of the picture of birthing. Now let's apply it to a few other areas. Let's go to the moon now. Hachodesh Hazelachem, the new moon. The new moon, why do we call it a new moon? Is it really a new moon? It's the same moon that was there the day before, a month before, and thousands of years ago. And the light of the moon is always full when we're facing the sun. The new moon, compared to our perspective on Earth, it appears new. The birthing of a new moon. And yet we call it a new moon, and we associate many, many forces to it. There's romance associated to it, poetry associated, the change of the tides, the effect on the tides on Earth, so it's physical effect. And so many other elements of that we associate with moonlight and the birth of a new moon. And of course there's the mystical side to it. What is the significance of it? Because we're not talking about the physical body of the moon, we're talking about the moon as it shines a new light to this Earth. That's the purpose of the moon, to radiate, illuminate this world. And as such, every month is a new moon. And that's why it's called Hachodesh in Hebrew. In Latin or Greek, the word month, I'm not sure where the root of it is. But Hachodesh, which is the word for month, means newness. Chidush. Hachodesh az Elochem. This shall be a new month. So it signifies the newness, and that's why Jewish people are compared. They're compared to the moon because the people, will be renewed like you. The Jewish people have gone through waxing and waning throughout history, ups and downs, to the point of literally the abyss of extinction, only to be reborn again. Just look at the Holocaust. Literally like a new moon. So even when it's all dark, and you think it's all over, a birthing is about to take place. And that's what God showed Moses in the heavens. That's why Moses was confused. He said, where's this new moon? Because how do you see a new moon? And there's discussion, commentaries explain, but God had to show him the secret of birthing. Because it's not easy to see a birth in this world, especially after you see 210 years of a genocide, of oppression, of persecution. To see a birth doesn't come easily. So therefore, he had to show it to him. And this is the birth of you and your people. And no matter how dark it is, I'm always there with you. And we can be redeemed in every given situation, which is why redemption of Egypt is called a birthing. The birth of the nation, as I said, but a birthing. But it comes with difficulty. It comes with challenge. But then it emerges as the birth of a new child, the birth of a new nation, the birth of a new era, which is what happened after the exodus from Egypt, the most famous exodus in history, which led to the greatest event in history, Sinai, the mandate of human rights that is now the basis of most of all the free world, based on the Torah's principles. So the breakthrough happened. We still have work to be done in the fusion, as I discussed, but the birthing has taken place, and more than the birthing, we've grown up, and we continue to grow. But many more birthings that are still necessary to take place and happen as we go forward. And the same thing, Isha ki Tazria v'yolda, as the chapter says. What's Isha? Isha represents, in the Kabbalistic structure of things, the feminine energy. The feminine energy represents the recipient, represents the absorber. Obviously, masculine and feminine energy both overlap, and they both have an absorber and they both have a transmitter. But the feminine is more of an internal, intimate energy. The one that gives birth, the woman that carries. She's able to carry a child within her. I remember once hearing from someone, a mother was pregnant, and her little daughter says to her, "Mommy, how do you have room inside of you for someone else?" And I thought to myself, imagine, men don't even have room for somebody outside of themselves. And here a woman for 9 months carries a child. It's not like a little child in a little closet or compartment in the body. They occupy your entire territory, your entire being, and change you completely. What is this physiology and the psychology necessary to be able to contain another human being when we all have our self-absorbed egos and our self-interest and so on? But it teaches you the secret of birthing. That the secret of birthing is bittul, the idea of combination of humility, modesty, suspending the self for something greater. That is, at the end of the day, that is a birthing. As long as you're self-consumed, you'll have what you have. You could be a great person, but you'll only have as much as your greatness brings you. You want some birthing, a new energy? How is something new going to enter when you're just old material? Comes the concept of the pregnancy of bittul, that you allow in, through stepping back, something new to emerge. If your cup is filled, there's no room for new liquid to fill that cup. When you empty yourself, a clay reikon, as the expression, an empty container, that becomes a recipient, an absorber, like a dry sponge. But not just a recipient absorber, it actually draws energy, because the vacuum draws energy. And that's exactly like pre the new moon, the vacuum the concealment, even the pain in a way you can say. The fact that you are anxious, the fact that you have angst, and you want something, you're not comfortable, that draws energy. When I call from my depths, from my narrow straits, my dire straits, then the widest chambers open up. As you see in anything, whenever you narrow something, it becomes narrow, but it also creates a rush and a power and a surge that would not be possible if everything was just spread out. So narrowness actually, like resistance, like a dam, creates more energy and more power and more thrust. And that again is the birthing that comes. So Isha, the feminine energy, is the one that is able to contain that ability to contain, to absorb, to not allow the ego to get in the way and say, I'm here, there's no room for anybody else. You want something else to come into this world, you have to step aside. And that's what Chava was able to do, but it comes with pain because eating from the tree of knowledge created a rift and a duality between the world of spirit and the world of matter. So the new energy doesn't come easily. But it does come when there's that bittul. And you could even argue that the pain, the birth pains and the pregnancy pains, even though no one wants pain, may be part of that process because that process creates a bittul. Now, had they not eaten from the tree of knowledge, the bittul, their selflessness would have been enough to bring them life without any pain. But once they ate from the tree of knowledge, once you've tasted from it and you become intimate with duality, then it takes a lot more. Now the pain comes physically, but there will be a day when that pain will be gone as well. So that is the process of birthing. And that also applies both the chapter, Tazria, the Hachodesh, as I said, the story of Passover, and the birthing of each of us in our own personal lives. In Kabbalistic terminology, there's a very fascinating concept called Yesh, Ayin, Yesh. And this is the secret of all birthing. Yesh means a state of being, of thinginess, you could say. Ayin means a state of void, a vacuum, nothingness. And Yesh is another state of thinginess, of itness. So it says the following formula. For a Yesh, one state of thing is to reach a new birthing and a transformation, a metamorphosis into a new state. It needs to go through an ayin be'emtza, through a void or a vacuum in between. So a seed will rot and deteriorate in the ground, and then it turns into beautiful blossoms, into a beautiful sapling, and ultimately a tree. With birth pains, in order to give birth to a beautiful child. All creativity is preceded by frustration, and the greater the creativity, the more the frustration that precedes it. Any breakthrough, by definition, has to break through the past resistance or the past history or the past patterns. If you're going to follow the past patterns, then you'll get the same results. If nothing changes, nothing changes. As I often say, if you think what you thought, you say what you said, you do what you did, what are you going to have? What you had. Brilliant, right? It's a simple equation. What is the sign of insanity? Someone who thinks they do the same thing and expect different results. You do the same thing, you're going to get the same results. That's how it works. So for something to be a paradigm shift, or any type of birthing, it requires this ayin, it requires a sense of suspension. That's called the bittul, a suspension. The Kabbalists, especially the Hasidic masters, explain there's actually two levels of bittul. One bittul that follows the first thinginess and itness as it goes into a state of erosion. Think of the caterpillar going into the chrysalis, the cocoon. And then there's an ayin that is reserved for the second state of things. Before it emerges, you also need a level of bittul and selflessness and and the suspension of self in order to emerge the beautiful butterfly. So really that ayin breaks into two. But overall, that's the secret of birthing. So when people say, I'd love to be able to come up with a new idea, a new business plan, a new concept, a new opening, a new possibility. My life is miserable or my life is difficult. Well, give me hope. The answer to all the above is you need to have an ayin. You need to somewhere give something up. You need to get out of your comfort zone, your routines, your habits. You're convincing that everything is that you're doing everything right. Don't be so self-secure. Don't be so self-confident. And I don't mean that in a negative way of being demoralizing or losing your self-esteem. I mean, don't be so sure of yourself. Allow a new opportunity, allow a new idea enter into your mind. This is a perfect way to do it. And a newness breeds newness. So when you hear something, say, what have I heard this week that's new? If your answer is, I haven't heard anything new this week, I haven't learned anything new, rest assured, you're not open to hearing something new, because no doubt that you had met somebody or heard something that is new that would have been new. But you're not allowing it in. Why? Because your sponge, your container is fully saturated. A wet sponge can't get wet. So the key thing is to step back and say, what am I going to, so-called, let me get into an absorbing mode, so I can then absorb something, a new experience, a new thought, a new friend, a new something. And that newness is the key. That vacuum, or that so-called stepping back, that ayin, is what allows the new yesh to give birth. You want to melt a piece of gold when you want to turn a piece of gold into a beautiful ornament, you have to melt it down. Nothing in life is birthed without the changing of the previous state. And that's because we live in a world of duality. Had we lived in a seamless world before the tzimtzum, then you don't need to have this type of effort. Because it's initially already a unified existence without total harmony. But in a world where there is not harmony, where there's still need and work to join and to fuse forces together, there we need to have that type of effort. As I said, the two things, Yigia and Kabbalah Sel. Yigia is the effort, exertion, and Kabbalah Sel is the sheer persistence and commitment. Which will, what do they have in common? That they don't take no for an answer. They don't just say, oh, you know what, okay, I'll do whatever is comfortable. No. Exertion means I'm going to work, I'm going to overcome the challenge, I will work harder, I don't get it yet, I'll keep. Persistence is the keeping on going, even when things seem tough, things don't seem hopeful. So you need the exertion and you need the utter and absolute commitment. And that's what opens up doors of all forms of birthing. So the secret to birthing, my friends, is this. The secret to birthing is being able to step back and allowing something new to enter. They say the expression, the Kehelet, the depressing words of King Solomon in Ecclesiastes, he says, a generation comes and a generation goes. And there's nothing new under the sun. As I mentioned before, the cynics, the more things change, the more they stay the same. That's true under the sun. Because under the sun, everything is going the regular, natural flow of things. But then you go above the sun, Lamayla min Hashemesh, higher than the sun, higher than the structure of existence, in the language of Kabbalah, Hasidus, higher than Zah, which is the emotional structure of the cosmic order, and emotional structure within us human beings, which mirrors the cosmic order. Then you go higher than Shemesh. There you have Hachodesh. There you have new things all the time. But how do you get there? You have to get out of your pattern. Your habits, your routines are the antithesis and block you from entering to that place. You have to go beyond through the effort and the commitment that's necessary. So as we enter this new month of Nisan, the chapter of Hachodesh, and we read about the new moon, and we read about the birthing Isha Tazria, and we read about and we're preparing ourselves for Passover and the birthing of the new child, the new nation, and us being renewed in the process every year. This is an opportunity to step back and look at your life and see what is it that you can do that's fresh. And maybe the other way around. Instead of what you can do, better what you're not doing. Better stop doing things, rather, I should say. There's doing things and going out and getting it. Sometimes it's stopping, shutting down, quieting down all that aggressive energy, quieting down all that active energy, and just letting yourself be. Turning into the feminine absorbing state, where it is a key to giving birth, allowing something into your life. If you go out and get it and all your tools are constantly in that aggressive mode of offense, you won't be able to absorb. As the Talmud says, while you're busy absorbing, while you're busy exuding, you can't be absorbing. And when you're absorbing, you shouldn't be exuding. Absorbing is listening. Listening for the new music, or the music that's there that you haven't heard. Smelling the roses, as they say. Stepping back and not being so loud. Allowing your inner voice, your inner song to emerge. This is the time. And that's why we say there are 10 songs that the Jewish people sang throughout history. And Shir Chodesh, the new song, will be the one that we sing when Mashiach comes. Because that's a new birthing. It's a new song. But every song is an outburst, is a burst of energy that's coming from within us. And that's why song has that power. It can reach deeper than our regular routines. It evokes something and makes us smile, it makes us cry, it transports us to another time and place. So this is the time of the year when we prepare ourselves for this. Rosh Hashanah and Tishrei has its own birthing in a different way. Here we're talking about the birthing in the month of Nisan, the new lunar moon, the lunar year rather, the lunar months, which are defined by newness. The sun is a consistent energy. It has sunspots, it has its shifts and changes, but it's not apparent. It is the moon that has that mystique. You see people who love each other. You never see them staring at the sun, even with sunglasses. You see them gazing at the moon. Because the moon has that haunting power. The haunting power of something that does not have its own light. It's reflecting the sun, but it does not a mirror image. It's not like sunlight. It has its own grayish, silverish color, and the different shifts, and it has its own particular power. Because it's the power of not just receiving as a reflection of a mirror, it's what the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters call Malchus. Malchus. Less lo megarmal klum, the Zohar says. Malchus has nothing of its own, but it has everything as a result. Because when it's in absorbing mode, it absorbs everything, even what's greater than itself. The higher levels, the higher spheres, the higher entities and attributes, they are what they are. Chesed, love, discipline, strength, compassion. And that's all they are. So they're defined by what they are. Malchus is defined by what it's not. It's that absorber, the ability to not just reflect it, to absorb, to integrate, to internalize greater experiences, birthing. And where does the birthing take place? In Malchus. In the 20th section of Ageres Hachodesh, the fourth part of Tanya, it's a fascinating and complicated and profound epistle, they call it, a letter written by the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, the author of the Tanya, written just a few weeks before he passes away. And on the 24th of Tevis of that year, 1812, Tov Kuf Ayin Gimel, and there he discusses at length the birthing that takes place in earth. On the earth has the power of vegetation, but also the birthing in Malchus, the birthing in the womb. And all as a result, Yesh and Ayin, cherish, something new that was not there before, is only possible when there's that recipient type of state. Because when you're giving, fine, you'll get what you were giving, you continue getting with the same flow. You want a new energy, you can't continue just flowing and giving from what was before. There has to be that pause, the ayin, the bittul, that allows the new birthing to take place. So may I wish everybody, as we already wish everyone a kosher and freilich and Pesach, Passover, may we experience real birthing in this season. And no matter what's going on in your life, even though you may say, I'm already too late for me, I'm hopeless, resigned, and so on, please don't think that way, because it's really not true. You have the power to access deeper forces, but you need to be open to it. No one can do it for you. If you're convinced that there's nothing new going on, you've written your own script. So open yourself up. Think of it, take the risk. Maybe there's a 1% chance there's something that's new. Try something new. Try to celebrate Passover in a new way. Try to meet a new friend. Try to invite a new guest. Try to read a new book. Do something that will shift the status quo. And your little shift can open up doors that will surprise you far more beyond your own, the effort. That the fruits of your labor will be far beyond the effort and the exertion and the commitment to doing so. But remember, it's the exertion, the effort, and the commitment that's necessary. So everyone be blessed with a very redemptive, freeing, and birthing month of Nisan. And until next Wednesday, let everyone have a very meaningful and birthful week. Thank you so much.